Good evening. Welcome to the August 10th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We are in council chambers, but we are masked up in keeping with the best practice guidelines from the DuPage County Health Department and the Illinois Department of Public Health. As always, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit, here. Commissioner Colavani,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover.
Here.
All present. Fantastic. Is there a motion concerning previous council meeting minutes?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the meeting minutes from August 3rd, 2021 as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Minor.
Rich, please.
Two minor edits on page 4, paragraph 3, line 4, to change the word prior to appropriate. And on page 6, paragraph 8, change the name from Greg Gabry to Brandon.
Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. Item 4 on our agenda is public comments portion of the meeting. We do not have any visitors tonight. It doesn't look like, at least yet. So we'll move on to item 5, our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is unanimous. That would take us right on down the road to item 6, our active agenda. This would be the portion of the meeting where we would act on items typically previously discussed. We do not have any active agenda items tonight. So item 7, our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we discuss or continue to discuss items without planning to take any definitive action tonight. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor Barnett. There are 3 items on tonight's first reading agenda. Item A is a continuing discussion of a proposed sidewalk along Norfolk. The ultimate direction we're looking for from the council at this point, when it does come to a vote, is go or no go, proceed or don't proceed with the sidewalks as designed and bid. Here to provide additional information about this item is our Public Works Director, Andy Sikich.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm presenting the proposed construction contract for the Norfolk sidewalk. As you'll recall, this proposed sidewalk is in the Kingsley School neighborhood as presented earlier in the year as part of the District 58 sidewalk plan. The plan is to construct a new sidewalk along the south side of Norfolk from Saratoga Avenue to Main Street. As with all sidewalk projects, there will be neighborhood trade-offs required for this project. Back in June, staff presented 4 different alternatives for the location of the sidewalk, including the trade-offs associated with each. The 4 locations were depicted on this slide. Alternative number 1 is a standard location, which is generally about 1 foot inside the right-of-way line. Alternative 2 is a carriage walk, with the sidewalk located immediately adjacent to the roadway. Alternative 3 was a combination of the standard location and the sidewalk meandered onto private property to avoid mature trees. And alternative 4 was a combination of the standard location meandered to a carriage walk to avoid the mature trees. In June, Council directed staff to design and bid the sidewalk in the standard location. This is generally 1 foot inside the right-of-way, which places the sidewalk, give or take, around 15 feet from the road edge. This alignment will result in the removal of 16 trees, but will have minimal impact on the existing drainage system and will not require any easements from private property owners. The low bid was submitted by A-Lamp Concrete Contractors in the amount of $197,759, and the FY21 budget includes $200,000 for the construction of this project. This slide should look familiar by now. It shows the rough timeline for the project as laid out by staff back in April. We are currently at the final go, no-go decision, as Dave mentioned, And once this construction contract is approved, staff will issue a notice to proceed to the contractor and we anticipate that the work will be completed by the end of October. The most prevalent neighborhood trade-off associated with this chosen alternative is tree removal. So I'd like to spend a few minutes going over some of the specifics that are included in this plan. As I mentioned, 16 total trees are anticipated to be impacted by the project. 9 trees between 12 inches and 40 inches in diameter will be removed and replaced, and 7 trees between 2 inches and 5 inches in diameter will be transplanted. Not all of the trees can be placed in front of the same address from which they were removed. As part of this contract, staff will evaluate specific conditions of each tree once the sidewalk has been laid out in the field. Roots will be exposed in certain cases, and if minor changes to the alignment or grade can be made to save a tree, staff will attempt to do so, but we will only do this if the tree can be saved with a high likelihood of success. This table is also in your packet. You can see that almost all the trees that need to be removed will either be transplanted or replaced in a location near their original location. So that would be in the right-of-way, somewhere near where they started off. In the case of 4 trees, though, we are anticipating that there will not be enough room to put a tree once the sidewalk has been constructed. So here's a graphical depiction of the anticipated tree removals, transplants, and replacements on the block between Saratoga and Carpenter. The green symbols indicate existing trees that will be transplanted. The yellow symbols show trees that will need to be removed. And the approximate final locations of where the trees will be placed after the sidewalk has been constructed are shown by the white and blue symbols. These are not exact, and they can change in the field due to unforeseen circumstances like unknown utilities, utility services, final grading, drainage, etc. But these symbols show approximately where we think the trees will be placed. You can see that the 3 trees at the west end of the project will not be replaced in front of the same houses where they were currently located. They will need to be planted elsewhere within the neighborhood. This is primarily due to drainage considerations. That's where the ditch is the largest and the deepest. Staff is anticipating that these trees can be planted in the vacant Saratoga right-of-way, as you can see there at the very west end of the project, so not too far from where they're currently at. This slide depicts the same basic information, but for the block between Carpenter and Main Street. In addition to the trees that will be removed, there's also some existing brush and vegetation that needs to be cleared adjacent to 6440 Main Street at the east end of the project, as you can see that little brown blob. And with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions or comments from the council on this one? Chris? Go ahead.
Yeah. The existing vegetation that's going to be cleared, was that part of a mitigation approach for stormwater?
No.
I feel like, no, that wasn't.
They're just volunteer, woody, invasive type trees, like bushes really, or brush.
Great, thank you.
Leslie?
Yes, yeah, I have a question. Do we anticipate that the removal of those trees that are going to have to be replaced elsewhere are going to have any impact on the stormwater and drainage in that neighborhood?
No, not significantly.
So we don't think that removing those trees is going to impact any sort of...
No.
Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank staff for all the presentations over the last couple of months and for getting this done actually really quickly. It is regrettable that we'll be losing some trees, but I think the ultimate result here is a positive one. I believe we should have sidewalks on both sides of the street going to our schools, and this is step one in getting there. I think the fact that we're transplanting as many trees as we can is a very positive thing, replacing others. I think ultimately it will be an improvement to the neighborhood. It will be an improvement to pedestrian safety, especially for kids. And we're going to, I think, still see a very strong tree canopy in that neighborhood for many decades to come. So I think it's a positive result. My vote will be go. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rich?
Yeah, I'm obviously not excited that we have to lose so many mature trees, but I do appreciate staff's effort and specifically transplanting those that are a size that would be able to survive that. What strikes me is that the Village Council several years ago had a strategy related to putting sidewalks on one side of every street. And then the question specifically came up, well, what do we do around schools where we should have sidewalks on both sides? And the decision of that council, and two of my colleagues here sat on that council, said let's allow those to surface based on the neighborhood need to do that. And this is our council responding to that and putting the safety of the elementary school children. So I'll be voting in favor.
Anyone else? Andy, I just had a question. You made a comment about there might be situations once you uncovered some roots and actually, laid it down, that there might be some slight adjustments to the sidewalk that could happen. I'm assuming that one of the other constraints on that is property lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
You're not anticipating any, you see some of the older spots where there's that big horseshoe around a tree. We're not anticipating anything like
No, we're not anticipating that.
that. Okay. Anyone else? Nicole?
Sure, I'll add one final thing. Although my colleagues have said a lot, I appreciate all the work on this. It was done pretty quickly. I am concerned that the trees that cannot be replanted are those 12-inch to 40-inch in diameter trees. Those are, I think 7 were 30 inches or more. That's just a big deal. Mature trees increase property value. We're called Downers Grove for a reason. And they help absorb water. And I just want to reiterate that what we heard from the residents that spoke at that very first meeting was the concern about water. And I know that there's supposed to be minimal impact there. I hope that is actually the case once this is all completed. For the sake of safety, as someone who has 2 small elementary age school children, I understand the need to do this. And I just hope the impact on the neighborhood is minimal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I think I'll just add that for those watching at home, perhaps in the neighborhood, that what you've seen and heard to this point, as well as from all my colleagues up here, is a legitimate concern about trying to make the right decision, knowing there isn't a perfect one. And so, as Rich said, we're prioritizing pedestrian safety, and there's a downside to that. There's no question about it. But I don't think anybody up here is doing anything other than really trying to figure out a best long-range answer, and we're doing it with a lot of input from our team. So this is the way we make good decisions, and I appreciate your help in that.
You bet. Thank you.
And with that, Mayor, we'll move on to item B, which is consideration of an ordinance amending the village's elevator safety standards. Here to provide information on this item is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Fielman. Good evening, Mayor and council members. As Manager Fielman noted, we're going to be talking about elevator code updates briefly. The village follows the State of Illinois Elevator Safety and Regulation Act. Earlier this year, the state updated their editions of the codes that they're following. So you'll be familiar when we did this before. We went from a 2006 IBC to 2015. Well, the state has now updated their codes to more current codes. So this is in reference to that. So the village is proposing to update our codes to follow the state codes. We are changing our code references to note the current edition, so we don't have specific years that we're following in case the state were to update this again. Our code would note current editions. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for the mayor and council at this time.
Anyone got any questions for Stan? Got to be some elevator jokes or something in here, right? Yeah, we do this a lot with our building code. There's international codes, and we try to stay as current as I think the state, who is typically a little bit behind the actual code, right?
Yep.
So this is not uncommon. We've seen this in fire. We've seen this in other life safety related things, and we'll continue to update our codes to be current.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
So was that your elevator pitch, Stan?
There it is.
That was good.
Thank you, Rich. I don't have to let you come back.
Staff is very excited and proud to present the last item on tonight's first reading agenda, which is a motion authorizing the key terms of an intergovernmental agreement with School District 58 for a partnership on our facilities efforts. Here to present information on this item is our Deputy Village Manager, Mike Baker.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The Village of Downers Grove and Grade School District 58 are both developing plans to address facility needs. The village plans on replacing the 42-year-old police station and 92-year-old village hall with a combined new building. District 58 is addressing facility needs for its administrative operations. The village and District 58 are exploring a partnership that would result in combining all of these functions into one building constructed here on the Civic Center property. The proposed facility partnership is intended to address the needs of both entities in a way that maximizes value and minimizes cost to our shared residents and taxpayers. Simply put, build less space and save taxpayers money. School District 58 serves an area that's a little larger than the village of Downers Grove. The district's total property tax base is $3.18 billion. Here's a map of the village of Downers Grove. The village's property tax base, $2.81 billion. When you look at the boundaries together, as shown here in this overlay map, it's apparent that both governmental entities serve nearly the same taxpayers and residents. In fact, 93% of the village's tax base is located within District 58 boundaries. 82% of District 58's tax base is located within the village. Generally speaking, we are serving the same residents. School District 58 is in need of a facility to house administrative functions. If they were to address these facility needs independently, they would be looking for approximately 7,100 square feet of space and 60 parking spaces. The village's plan to construct the combined police station and village hall here on Civic Center property consists of about 75,000 square feet of space with environmentally sustainable features, about 340 parking spaces for a variety of parking needs, and the sale of a portion of the property to be developed with an apartment building. Our facility plan includes a financing plan, which is in preliminary form, as shown on this slide. The village will use cash on hand and a bond issuance to pay for the new facility and related improvements. Debt service payments will be made using a mix of existing and new revenue sources. Here's the concept site plan that has been presented a few times previously. The village and School District 58 could partner on our facility plans and construct a shared building, a police station, village hall, and school district administration center. By partnering, we would construct less space, achieve a scale economy in construction activity, reduce the total construction cost, and ultimately reduce the tax burden on our shared taxpayers. A shared facility would include some space used exclusively by the village, some space used exclusively by District 58, and many spaces that would be shared. Lobbies, hallways, elevators, conference rooms, the council chambers would all be shared spaces within the new building. The village is proposing an intergovernmental agreement that would result in constructing a shared facility. The village would design, construct, and own the building. Portions of the building would be leased to District 58. The lease term would be 50 years. Lease payments would be based on the incremental cost of constructing a building suitable for hosting District 58. The incremental cost, and therefore the annual lease payments, are expected to be small. The district would also share in the cost of designing the facility. As part of the agreement, District 58 would forego all property tax revenue generated by the apartment development. All of this tax revenue would be used to help pay the cost of constructing the new facility. It would take several documents to take this partnership from concept to reality, including key terms, much like a letter of intent that are included in the council packet this evening, and an intergovernmental agreement, and finally a lease. The village and District 58 may also execute operating agreements once we're working in the same building. Staff is requesting that the village council approve the key terms at the next council meeting. District 58 will consider key terms at their September meeting. If approved, we will continue designing the shared facility and begin drafting the intergovernmental agreement. In summary, this proposed partnership would result in the construction of one building to be used as a police station, Village Hall, and District 58 Administrative Center. Sharing space would reduce the amount of space constructed, lower the cost of construction, and reduce the tax burden on our shared residents and taxpayers. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Rich?
Yeah, on the sharing the incremental construction costs, is that just whatever the pure number is and then divided by the 25-year period, or will we also be folding in finance costs, calculating the true incremental costs all the way through, including what the debt service would be?
This would just be District 58's portion of the new facility. The construction costs associated with that portion of construction would be isolated and identified and used to determine that lease payment spread over 25 years.
Could we extend that to taking the full, day-to-day and based on the payment differential that we would have to make in a combined facility versus just our own facility, and then subtract that amount?
We could do that. However, the sort of benefits to each entity was the lower overall cost to District 58 in terms of just spreading the incremental pure construction cost. And for the village and our shared residents and taxpayers, maximization of the revenue from the apartment complex that would be the tax dollars funneled in to pay for this building. So we think that the dollars in the property taxes from the apartment building are of a greater magnitude than the interest payments or those calculations. So we try to capture the benefits using that approach, just incremental cost and then a waiver of the revenue from the apartment building.
So because we would have an income stream based on the apartments, and that would actually end up lowering the cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
An important aspect of that too is that potential TIF money is shared money really. It's for the community, and so this exactly how it's applied, the straightest, cleanest, least overhead management way of applying that money makes a lot of sense. It's because you go back to those maps, and we're trying to lower the cost of these needs to our overall constituents. One of the things too I'll add is that and it's related to that financing component, is that this kind of concept we get at it a couple different ways in some of the descriptions, but it also minimizes the amount of property in the village that is not taxable. And ultimately, long term, that's a benefit to everybody in the community. So, any other, Greg, please?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, many thanks to staff, to all of my colleagues, to District 58's board, and to District 58 staff for putting all of this together, and then obviously going to District 58 and giving them the presentation, and them having the I think wherewithal and courage to go down this road. It's been a long time coming, and it is the right result, I think, for reasons the mayor has mentioned, for all the cost savings, shrinking the footprint of government, giving the best possible value to our shared taxpayers, and finding all the various synergies that we can find to work together even better. I mean, this is the way that governments should work together. And my only regret in the whole process is that I can only vote in favor of this once. I'm on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chris, please.
Yeah, I would also echo that. I think this also seems to be like something that probably maybe doesn't always line up like this, right? District 58 looking for space, us building space. So the opportunity here is a perfect time, and I think win-win is maybe too light a term. This is an excellent opportunity for all the reasons that my colleagues mentioned. I would also add, given the high overlap between and the opportunity for District 58 and the village to be even in the same building, some of those communication efficiency that you get from being in the same building is almost priceless. So I think that's just another added benefit, and I too want to thank staff in 58 for seeing this through And I fully support this and think this is just outstanding work.
For the record, we wanted those lights to flicker during a facilities discussion.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Nicole
Hang on a
first.
minute. Nicole?
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Just ditto what my colleague said. I don't want to repeat. One thing I do want to repeat from Mr. Baker's presentation is that this maximizes value and minimizes costs to taxpayers. One more time. Maximizes value and minimizes cost to taxpayers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues on this. I think it's a wonderful, proactive way to help our joint taxpayers. We need to build a facility, they need to build a facility, and the synergistic approach comes out with an amazing win for our village.
Leslie?
I'm not going to echo everything else. Thanks to everyone. And also just echoing the thank you to mentioning the sustainability component, knowing that we will now be able to build a much more efficient building for both in a way that will be able to kind of drive that process and make sure we're getting the best bang for our buck for all of the taxpayers for both of those buildings. So I'm thrilled to see how that is going to play out, and I'm just happy to be consolidating space in that way. So that's a big benefit.
Anyone else? Thank you.
In closing, just a big thank you to our staff colleagues at District 58, Kevin Russell, Todd Dreyfall, Kevin Bardo. We've been working collaboratively with District 58 throughout the pandemic in a variety of ways, and it is a joy to work with such professional staff who are philosophically aligned with the village. Looking forward to this project. And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Only one item tonight to present, and that is an ordinance amending the village's elevator safety standards. It will be on next week's active agenda. Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor and council member reports. We'll start on my right. Rich.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Leslie.
The only thing I have to say is as school is beginning, be kind to each other, be kind to the teachers and administration, follow the policies and mask up, and just give everybody a little bit of extra grace. I get to be the first-time school mom with my daughter going to kindergarten this year to Fairmount, so I'm excited and nervous for this to be her first experience all at the same time. So just be kind.
No report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
No report. When's the fest?
Well, I'll do that next week when it
all
gets
right.
closer. I don't want people to forget about it.
All right.
And next week it's even closer to the date, so
Gotcha. Okay.
holding on to that one.
Danny, what do you have?
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Chris?
No report, Mayor. Thanks.
Greg?
Mayor, I'm going to grab a little flyer that you've got here on the dais in front of you. Just remind folks about the upcoming Grove Foundation golf outing on September the 11th. You can find out additional details online at thegrovefoundation.org, I believe it is. Shame on me for not knowing that off the top of my head. And if you need any information, send me an email. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I do not have a report, but we are going to take a short break. We're going to reconvene in the committee room and talk about boards and commissions. So 5 minutes or so. Those watching at home or watching this recording later, we're taking a move over here because we're going to have a little bit more of a discussion tonight as opposed to an agenda item with a defined outcome. This is the subject of boards and commissions. Chris broke the table.
Sorry about that. New guy.
For those that were here 2 years ago, you guys undoubtedly remember we had talked about getting into this subject, and then we put it on hold in an effort to kind of focus on facilities, and then came COVID. And so the first thing you know, 2 years later, we haven't talked about this yet. Over the years, there have been a variety of opinions, there probably are around this table, with proper use of boards and commissions, how they benefit or don't the community, how we engage them or don't, who engages them. And it's important, like some of these other governance discussions, that the seven of us, even if we don't maybe agree, that we understand and we're all dealing with the same set of expectations. And so one of the goals tonight is to talk a little bit about what do we all feel like we want these boards and commissions to do or accomplish? What are our expected outcomes of having boards and commissions? That, if we talk about that, and then what we think, that'll help us decide if there's changes to the process, the program that need to be instituted or considered. It'll help our staff decide whether or not we're all pointed in the same direction. If not, they can help us sift through where our differences are. It's an important thing. It's as you know, there's a lot of our community that is connected to our boards and commissions, and our boards and commissions engage our community. If you think about traffic and parking, for instance, and our recent forest and prairie stuff, there are interactions, and they're important that they're done in a way that we're all comfortable with and that the community appreciates. So, you had a report. I think everybody got a chance to go through that. It talked a little bit about what we do now, how we do it, why we do it. There is a council policy on the subject. So I guess I'll open it up and see if anybody has any comments or questions or things they want to talk about deeper. Anyone want to kick it off? Leslie, go ahead.
Kick it off. For me, I think the most important part of boards and commissions is, I think we probably all agree on it, that we want a good cross-section of the community. We want, diversity. We want to make sure that we're capturing all of the values and the views and the experiences of our residents. And so if we're not doing a great job of that yet, and if we're not getting those applications in that are diverse, then I think we should probably do a little bit of self-reflection in where we're putting these, like announcements out, or how we're marketing them, or just so that we can do a little bit better job. So for example, when I was a hiring manager, I did not get diverse applicants in my field, and so I had to take a real hard look at myself about what I was expecting of people, making sure that was clear, and then making sure that I was recruiting in a way that I would better get diverse applicants. So for me, I think that's probably the number one most important thing for me currently in our current boards and commissions process, is to make sure that we're getting a good cross-section and that we're being really transparent about how we're doing it and how we're marketing it. I also really appreciate having transparency in how we make these decisions. So, the narrowing them down, and then having council members kind of take a look at some of like the top picks. I just like having a standardized procedure so that it's really clear and transparent to the community how we're making these decisions. And so just making sure we're keeping up with that is important to me as well. Another thing that I know that I talked about in my one-on-one is that the only current board and commission that we don't have staff subject matter experts in is the Environmental Concerns Commission. And to me, I feel like if we're going to be using these boards and we really want to maximize everybody's time, both staff and residents, we probably should only have boards and commissions where we have a staff member expert. So my personal opinion would be to make sure that we have somebody with an environmental and a sustainability lens on staff. But I think that we probably should look at that critically and just make sure that we have those bases covered. And then I know that it's come up in the past that it would be, especially from a lot of boards and commissions, that we want to see more done, or we would like them to be able to bring us material. One day I would love that, but I personally don't think we're there now, and I don't think we're going to be there in the near future. So I'm not currently interested in changing that. I think right now, I feel like a great organization, you would probably only want them to be operating at maybe 80% of max, so that you can have those ebbs and flows of people taking vacation or whatnot. I feel like Downers Grove runs at like a 98. And we just don't have the ability for staff to take that time to sit on extra meetings or sit on ad hocs or do those types of things and really be able to put in the time that we should be dedicating to it if we do want to make that switch. Something that I personally would love to look into and do, but I don't think it's something that we're probably going to do in the next couple of years, just knowing what's on our plate going forward. So those are my thoughts.
Anyone else got something they want to jump in with? I'm going to go back to a question for everybody if not. Rich?
No, it's
Oh.
Yeah, if I may,
Sure.
Mayor,
Yep.
I agree with a lot of what Commissioner is speaking about in regards to staff. I too feel like there's an opportunity, if we're going to look to these commissions and boards to provide more than what they currently are, which from my viewpoint is more when we're asking them rather than these commissions getting together and generating ideas or coming up with things that we as a village, as a council should be thinking about or looking at. I agree. I think there does need to be staff. I think the EEC is a perfect example of where there are lots of pressing issues that impact our village and beyond. And the fact that we don't have someone on staff that has that sort of expertise is a concern. So is that more of a reason to look to the commission to support, or a reason to shy away from that? So I would be more, and I'm interested to know what the rest of this group sort of thinks about in terms of the roles of these commissions, how they've been, and where we may want to see them be, because I think there's an opportunity. We have seemingly a lot of engagement from the community, a lot of willing participants to these boards and commissions, and I would just love feedback from this group on are we maximizing that resource? So those are a few of my initial thoughts.
Anyone else with some initial thoughts? Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think a lot of the things we're talking about, a lot of things we've already heard tonight really boil down to two different topics, right? We're talking about appointment, and then we're talking about how do we use them. The village has used a lot of different methods for appointing members to boards and commissions. Mayor Barnett's done it differently than Mayor Tully, who did it differently than Mayor Sandak, who did it differently than Mayor Krajewski. And if we can get from staff, I think, a handle on all of that if we really want to go down that road. But the upshot from me is that I think the process we've got is, I think, more equitable. I mean, technically under the code, the mayor has the authority to put a name forward. And we give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and that is what it is. That's not what has happened, and it's typically not what has happened completely. Different mayors have asked for input in different ways, and I think the way that Mayor Barnett has structured it in terms of kind of saying, all right, here's sort of a short list, and can you really vet these folks, is a fair way to do it. Maybe there's different opinions on that, and we can delve into all of that, but I think the appointment process seems to be working fairly smoothly from my point of view. Getting more and better and more diverse candidates, absolutely. Let's publicize them anywhere and everywhere. We want, I think, the true cross-section of our community to be reflected. In terms of the use of boards and commissions, I want more input, and I've struggled in articulating this to staff, but I'd like to see a way for them to give us suggestions without necessarily driving staff time. I think the allocation of staff time, for reasons Commissioner Sadowski, if you could talk about, is really critical to what we do, and that is the council's purview and not that of any board or commission. With the small caveat that Plan Commission and ZBA are statutorily required, and there are going to be hearings that go and they get continued and what have you. And we have to allow for that. There's nothing else we can do. So we have to be cognizant of the structure of our organization. We have to be cognizant of the staffing concerns that go along with that. And I think it's important, too, that we not necessarily treat boards and commissions like subcommittees. I mean, it's not quite that structure. So I'd like to see more input, more information, more sort of flagging something, hey, you should be thinking about this, without necessarily driving the complete agenda. And that's a fairly inarticulate way of trying to put it, but I hope what I'm trying to say is coming through.
Okay, Nicole?
I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Jose just said. You know, I think we have to remember, council we are a governing and policy-making body. We're elected people to do just that. Boards and commissions are recommending bodies based on topics typically assigned by us. To your point, I would like to see them giving suggestions, but I don't want them to give staff more work, if that makes sense, because I don't think that that's their role. You know, I do agree with us getting a better cross-section of the community. I don't know how, I don't know in what better way we do that. I feel like we publicize these things and somehow, you know, even in our local election cycles, we're not really getting that diversity. So I'd be curious to see what more we could do and in what better way. That's not necessarily my wheelhouse, but you know, I certainly think that that's an issue across the board with just getting diverse candidates in our community. One thing that I would like to see is a recording of board and commission meetings that is then posted and archived. You know, we've got council member participation discouraged at board and commission meetings, and that goes back and back for lots of different reasons why that stopped happening and why it is now discouraged. But in that same vein, for the sake of transparency, I think community members should be able to watch the board and commission meetings should they want to. I think reading, and even for ourselves, reading the minutes, it's just not the same. It doesn't give you the full effect of what's going on at that meeting. So that's something that I would like to see, and then that way it's archived, the community members can watch, we can watch without interfering in those meetings. That's all, Mayor.
Anyone else got some initial thoughts? Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. Well, I've served on 2 boards and commissions, Zoning Board of Appeals and the Plan Commission. So my thinking about this has matured, particularly being on the other side and understanding the role of village council. At one time, I was a proponent of Plan Commission should be able to bring things forward and make recommendations to the village council. One of those specifically happened to be Downtown Design Review, because it was something I've been working on since 2017. And so my involvement on Plan Commission as part of when we reviewed the comprehensive plan was to get the insert in there that we should consider Downtown Design Review as a thing. So that became part of the that document, our roadmap and how to move forward. And then I had to bring it forward in village council. We have precious time of things that we can get done. You know, next week we're going to be talking about our long-range plan and what our priorities are. Well, we know we have some big priority items that are going to suck up a lot of the time and oxygen. I'd be a lot more averse to have a specific board and commission trying to direct specific policy issues that are the responsibility of the elected officials. For instance, if you really are adamant and passionate about driving policy, then you should run for office. And then you can sit in this room, and then you find out the same time constraints that we do have. And with some of them, particularly those who have public hearings, that becomes the legal foundation. Everything we went through with the ad hoc committee on the comprehensive plan, ad hoc committee on stormwater, that became part of our decision-making process. And then we created a comprehensive plan, we created the new downtown zoning, and that formed the legal foundation for the decisions we make. And then it gets down to an individual petition, and we're following the rules that are outlined for us, and that protects us legally that we are going through that process. Regarding the appointment process, I like the fact that I was given, you know, X number of candidates that I could talk to. You know, I didn't know their backgrounds when I was talking to them on the phone. I was more interested in what they did and how it aligned with that particular level of expertise. I'd sort of question what would you want the Environmental Concerns Commission directing us to do at this point based on what our responsibilities are as a village council. I also used to think that it was more beneficial to attend the meeting and actually see what was going on. But I also recognize that it can influence, it has the possibility of influencing or intimidating people who are sitting on that particular board or commission. The minutes aren't designed to capture everything verbatim, so I totally agree that if we can't sit in the meetings to see particularly the more complex issues, then we should have the opportunity to at least see the recordings.
Okay. Anybody else got any initial comments? I'll give you my 2 cents then and frame it up the way Greg started it. There's sort of 2 subjects in my mind. One is how we're going to use these boards, and the other is the appointment process. And I think they go together. If you were going to use a board to delegate work, if you were going to say, we want the tech committee to actually figure out which ERP system to build, right, or to buy, to use that as an example, then you would, if that was your intended way of using those boards, you would staff those boards a certain way. Because those boards right now function as mostly recommending boards that take up subjects we give them, the way we're staffing them now is an attempt at building a cross-section. So it's a sort of another round of public input as opposed to expertise. We don't have maybe the perfect environmental scientist on our staff here, but our resources are not limited to the Village of Downers Grove. We have our staff who are very good, and frankly, if you look at our past, have exhibited the type of behavior and idea generation that's been really helpful to our community. But beyond that, we have groups like DMMC, we have the Metropolitan Planning Group. There are lots of resources that are in play when we're considering subjects beyond whether it's sign ordinance law or environmental improvement opportunities or even traffic. We are seldom, I can't think of a time when we have chosen to limit ourselves. Think about traffic. How often do we end up with traffic studies done as part of the data input, right? It's if you staffed if you lined up your stormwater commission, that's one where I served for a while. If you lined that up with nothing but stormwater engineers, any subject that comes to them, I would be concerned whether or not the review and the advice that we were getting from that recommendation was adequately considering all of the non-technical aspects of stormwater. Because the truth is, what this body does, just like we saw tonight with trees on Norfolk, is balances things. That's all we do. We seldom take the one technical perfect answer, or the one technical, the one politically supported answer, right? We're always in the business of balancing. So for the moment, what we're doing with those boards and commissions is we're staffing them with a cross-section of the community intentionally. I don't know if everybody has seen, and I apologize for that, but your goofy mayor who does things with spreadsheets has one for this process. And so what I do is every one of those boards has the various members on there. I try to fill them in the way I think they will represent a cross-section, not so much geographically or demographically, but I have categories of technical expert, I have categories of advocate, I have categories of community connector, to try and think that do these folks fill these roles that creates a board that is a cross-section of the community and is likely to provide recommendations to us that are somewhat consistent with what this board thinks. Because here's the other thing, if you burn staff time and volunteer time and then just keep rejecting them, that's a lousy answer. What that does is generate aggravated people and wasted staff time. So the use thing, I think, is a question. I hear the premise that we want to get more input, and I don't know anybody that would sit up in a representative position and say they don't want input. But trying to translate, as Greg said, what does that mean that doesn't just sort of randomly generate staff time for subjects that we might not take up, or subjects that are in conflict with what 6 or 5 or 4 of us feel about a subject, is a challenge. I don't know the answer, but it's something to be cautious of as we try and think about how we might change the way those boards operate, if the goal is to try and get more input. That appointment process, I hope the folks that have gone through it don't feel anything. I mean, if there's improvements to be made, I'm certainly interested in hearing them, but it has been intentionally inclusive. It is a mayoral appointment. I mean, there are some realities, right? The mayor gets to appoint to this thing. So I've tried to do 2 things. I've tried to do it in a way that allowed input from the council, and it had a structured process, to Leslie's point, where it was understandable. You know, whether you think it's the right process or not, it's a very easy to describe process. The people that are there know why they're there, and people would understand it. It's not like there's some big mystery behind it. I really think that the idea of recording them is something we should just start doing. I mean, Rich laid out some of those thoughts really well. You know, it's minutes are tough, and yet when we're sitting there, it changes the dynamic of the room. So I don't know how exactly to make that happen, but I got a feeling we could. It's pretty easy to do. So I'm hopeful that we'll all bobblehead that, and the staff will run away with that as seeing all these heads go up and down. The question I think we've had in the past that I'm wanting, and I was going to try and put a question out to everybody, is this more specific about how should these boards be used? As recommending boards, or as boards of experts who generate content? Because Greg hit it on the head, and we probably won't answer it tonight, but that is a huge concern, right? If you have a group of people sitting on a board who are advocates and specialists in an area, to expect them to not generate ideas is nuts, right? I mean, that's what they do. They have a passion for whatever the subject is. We don't have any extra time. I don't know if it was 70% or 90% or what the magic number is, but we are, if you were running in production, we do not have any sprint capacity in this organization. None. And you know, staffing up for that is not easy or quick or anything. I mean, that's a long-term thing. If we thought we wanted that kind of ability, that is a long-term thing. I think Leslie alluded to that. It's certainly not a right-now thing. Mm-hmm. But there's no sprint capacity in this organization. So, and we get asked to run all the time. So I personally think that the way they're structured now should remain. I'd welcome any opportunities to change, to reconsider the appointment process, and I think we ought to get them on videotape. Please.
Yes, I agree that we should get them on videotape for sure. And I do appreciate the process. I guess the only clarification is I hope that the folks who we want to put forward have officially applied to those which we're recommending them for, just because I want to make sure that there's interest on their end in the positions that they're looking to take. And I do agree that we need to have a balance. It can't all be just a stormwater engineer. You know, you have to have folks coming at it from different angles. I guess what I'm struggling to verbalize and to get into words is that I definitely want a balance. But if you want a recommendation about something like a stormwater or a sustainability, you have to have somebody that's at least an enthusiast in the topic. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have to be an expert, but looking for someone who at least, you know, whether it be in the written part of their application or, you know, hobbies or whatever they may put on their application, but just kind of some sort of hobbyist that's interested in this topic, I guess, is important, because then I feel like we can get a balance, and we don't need expertise, but we at least have enthusiasm, and I don't know if that's the right word that I'm going for, but it's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Hey, Leslie, before we go any further on that subject, so that you know the kind of categories, let me redefine this again, because I wrote them down so I'd know. First of all, there's an advocate, so irrespective of whether it's community events or whatever, there's an advocate. There's a person who, when we interview them and we ask them why'd they put down this board or commission, because they're into that subject. This community connector idea is that these boards need to be, you know, they have an opportunity certainly to be kind of outbound information sources, right? Environmental, legal, engineering, architect / design and finance. But that was intentional, so that when you had a board of stormwater engineers, it wasn't just engineers, but there were some advocates for it, right? There were some advocates, and there were some people with some technical expertise, so that those conversations were meaningful. I think you definitely need those things. So just so you know, that's sort of the criteria right now.
And I think those are really important categories, so I totally agree with that. And then the only other clarification I have is I agree that we should be sticking with recommending boards with you on that one. And of course, there are small things, right, that are not necessarily policy-driven, that could be small little projects that, you know, this board could take up. And I think those are maybe the types of things that we're all talking about, you know, not big policy questions, but like, hey, could we look into this one thing? Is that okay? And my only worry with things like that is that the staff does still tend to write the report. So I'm worried that even if it's something small, that it's still going to be a little bit of a time sink, so I don't have a right answer, unfortunately. I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that. Because if we even do have some of those small things that come up, kind of, I guess my reasoning for saying that I think that it would be helpful to have experts for each is because, say the ECC came up with something and an expert would be like, no, I know in my experience that this is not even worth spending our time on because it's just going to go down a rabbit hole. That's kind of more of the thinking along why it's helpful to have at least somebody with a little bit of expertise in that area, because if we do get to a point where we want to have a recommendation or just, get maybe a small suggestion, that we have somebody on staff who can be like, oh, this is going to be a time drain. We probably don't want to get into this. So that was kind of my rationale for that, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Anyone else got anything they want to kick into this dialogue?
And this is something we get to revisit every couple of years, right?
Get to revisit every couple of years. We have a policy, which I think you have a copy of. We have a current policy. That's the policy. It's been, I think it was 09, maybe something like that. So what we're talking about is several things. As Greg kind of alluded to. One is the policy component of it. The second is sort of the procedural component. So there's this. I and I think my colleagues, my predecessors before me, have tried to find ways to engage others in the process, and we've done it different ways, some more successful than others, and so that's another part of the conversation is, do people feel like that's happening, or that, it's, at the end of the day, it's an appointment, right? But there's a policy, so I mean, to your point, do we revisit it? We revisit it theoretically every August in terms of making some appointments to those that are expiring, but the policy has been static since 2009.
So staff puts forward a formal opportunity for discussion about board and commission engagement every election cycle.
As governance.
As the government we're doing
Yeah,
tonight.
right.
And then the informal stuff happens all the time as appointments come up. So I would say both formally and informally on a recurring basis, yes.
I guess my point is more related to, we have some big items that'll surface on our radar screen next week. They're already out there. We know, facilities and things of that nature, putting in the new ERP system. So we have a unique period of time for these next couple of years where we're going to absorb a lot more resource than we typically would. So we may not have the opportunity of introducing big change now to just, okay, let's keep that in the back of our minds. Because I'm sure, we're all going to have ideas that we present next week that may be great ideas, but okay, who's going to do that? And are we going to have to staff up significantly and incrementally, and then would it take our eye off the ball with some of the higher priority items? Because we're not going to have to do a facility again for hopefully a long time after we get that.
Probably. Leslie, you mentioned how we get applicants, and I think we should ask that question and figure out if there's something additive we can do. I haven't done any sort of, data analysis to determine and try and quantify or qualify the diversity component of our applicants. Anecdotally, it's a pretty diverse group. What it is small. Yeah. It's kind of shockingly small, given the size of the community. So so if there's some way to cast a larger net, we should probably try and do that.
Do we post on our village website open boards and commissions? I know we post regular job openings within the village. Do we post open boards and commissions to our website?
Or social media every once in a while, just as a reminder of what they do.
Sorry, when I'm saying website,
that's what I'm wondering. It's just a reminder of
Social media.
and expectations, right? So making sure that people up front have the expectation that they're not going to be bringing things forward, right? Just to make sure that we're very upfront with this is a recommending board. This is
So yes, in 2017, we completely overhauled the recruiting and appointment process to cast a wider net, create more awareness, get more diversity, and increase transparency and understanding. That includes all sorts of increased awareness and posting, etc. Normally that process starts in May, and you would see a flurry of activity and report outs, etc. That was not done this year because we wanted to see what this discussion brought us. As we conclude this, it's clear direction to, as I heard so far, start that up again, and we would start that immediately.
Sounds great.
I think that's just one easy way
Mhm.
to put it out there and see if we get any additional people.
Definitely.
I don't know enough about exactly what we've done in the past, but more of it would probably be good, because it's a relatively short pool right now.
Well, and I think in encouraging people to take the application seriously, because I've seen the applications where they wanted to sign up for 10 different boards or commissions at the bottom and say, okay, what you're really passionate about. And then you look at what their professional background is, maybe what their volunteer work is, and then you have the conversation. So those that just didn't have a particular background, you can say, okay, you're probably not best suited for the Plan Commission or Architectural Design Review Board. We have a few where we have specific requirements. ADRB is easy because you need a lawyer, you need a board member of the Historical Society, you need 2 architects, and then the rest are just, at-large interested people. One of them that I nominated during an interview process for this position expressed his interest in historic preservation and how he's all over that. Well, that resonated with me, and so now he's serving in a good way. So I think on the application, those things would kind of bubble up. Just like, if you were interviewing for anything, does this particular candidate have a background that matches the profile?
So Dave sort of recapped what he hears for the moment. Anybody hear or see anything different? Feel strongly about something opposite that or in a different direction?
I heard recruiting and recording is what I wrote down.
Yeah.
The 2 R's? We
2 big
gotta come up with a
Rs.
third one.
I'm glad you said it that way.
Well, you're the teacher. I did my homework on that one.
Okay, well then is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I'm going to stop real quick and just point out that we've got the return of coffee with the council this weekend, and I forgot to mention it during the council member reports.
I was so going to mention that.
I know it's it's
Mayor's
just so
super
far away
excited.
Just don't let it be this hot.
from the mayor's house. But no, 9 o'clock at the farmer's market. Hope everybody can come out. Now that I've done that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. Good night. Thank you for that, Greg.
I know.